What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. This podcast is sponsored by Berman Falk Hospitality Group, a design-driven furniture manufacturer who specializes in custom case goods and seating for hotel guest rooms. Today's guests are experts at project management, leadership, architecture, and interior design. He brings almost 20 years of experience working mainly in the South and on the West Coast, with previous projects working with the likes of Four Seasons and St. Regis. She also has 20 years of experience designing and managing projects with the likes of Avroco, One Kings Lane, and many more. They're both executive directors of architecture and interiors, respectively, at Morris Adjmi Architects. Ladies and gentlemen, Ian Mills and Becca Roderick. Welcome.
Hey, Dan. Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, Dan. Happy to be here.
It's so good to have you here. And I love the challenge of multiple guests because mostly it's all one-on-one. And I love it when I get uncomfortable challenging my capabilities. So I want to thank you both for being here because I also think it's super incredibly important that we get an architect and an interior designer on the call because oftentimes there's conflict between the two, but I find that that conflict often finds the best path forward that yields the greatest results. And I want to dig into that because at MA, can I call it MA?
Yeah,
Always.
definitely.
Awesome. It's really interesting that you have both of these in-house and working in Congress. So, but before we dig into all of that, I want to just ask each of you, how do you define hospitality? Becca, you go first.
I'll go first. I think this is the challenge, a little bit of working together too. When is it the right time to speak? So we're gonna practice our excellent working together skills and try to take turns on this.
Who packs the biggest punch? Interiors generally or architects?
I think we take turns.
Dan, what are you trying to do? You're setting this up for a sparring match.
Yeah, it's like that social media thing where the music comes on and then they both start fighting, right? And then the good stuff
you got to get
out.
the graphics ready, right?
Yes. No, but Becca, you go first. What does hospitality mean to you?
We've been thinking about this a lot recently, I think, internally. And so I think I have a very clear sort of definition of it in my head. And I think when you strip everything back and peel things away, hospitality is really about caring for people and fostering community. And I think caring for people really, really filters down to this sort of sense of belonging and sort of encouraging these sort of meaningful connections between people. And by the way, I don't think that's necessarily tied to budget or exclusivity of an experience. You can be in a fast casual or sort of casual space and feel very cared for and like you belong in that space. And alternately, you can be in a very high-end space and feel equally as cared for. So it's not specific to budget, but it is really what it's all about at the end of the day.
Great. And Ian, how about you?
Yeah, I think similarly, it's, just sort of showing people a good time, just allowing for that to happen and sort of fostering that, but, and not being too heavy-handed. And I guess we think about that, from a design perspective of just allowing that to happen or, fostering that without sort of being too heavy-handed with your hospitality.
Now, I want to go back to that collaboration and conflict and I don't know, like that recipe that I think makes for such incredible outcomes. So MA, because when I think of MA in the past, I know differently now, but when I think of MA from the past, it's this incredible architecture firm that designs these incredible buildings. But walk me through the thinking on getting and really bolstering that interior side of things. And in a perfect world, I know sometimes you may work on just the architecture, sometimes just the interiors, many times both. what's the best possible outcome on a project where you're doing both, and from like the entire client experience to how you set up and collaborate on projects to the end result?
I think it starts from the beginning with the sort of creation of the big idea for the project, the narrative, the concept idea, the sort of North Star. And I think if architecture and interiors is aligned in that vision, which we are if we're working together on a project, I think it becomes efficient for the client. It becomes, the messaging is clear from an aesthetic perspective. And I think that end user really feels that in their experience of the project. So I think, that really is a sort of like pinnacle of where things start, is that initial discussion about a project, its context, and then the work that we're doing there, and having that sort of alignment between architecture and interiors in order to sort of, as you said, Ian, to foster that going forward, I think is just really critical. It's a game changer. That is like where the magic happens, right?
Okay, so now we heard it from the interior side. Now, Ian, is your magic perceived differently?
It's totally different. No, I'm kidding. No, I think it's the same. And I'm appreciative of Becca, joining the team and really like helping to bolster the ID side of the practice, because really they're it's really critical to have both. And I think what she's saying is right, where at the beginning of the project, it's like where the ideas are very fragile or just, kind of coming and going easily. It's great to have both teams present at that point and both teams like very invested and to really establish that concept. And then ID may not work on the project for a while, but for that very focused early phase of the project where the ideas are really being established and like the North Star is being established, it's really nice to have everyone at that table. And that's really hard to do when the architecture is separate from the interiors. So I couldn't agree more.
A trend that I've been seeing is many of these larger architecture companies that, and specifically to hospitality, that don't have a hospitality interiors component to them, have been acquiring interior companies as like a bolt on to their overall service that they're bringing to the market, and it's helping them win a lot more projects. What's interesting is that's through an acquisition model, but at MA, you guys are building this up from within. So I'm curious, like, when did that strategy really become first and foremost at MA, and what kind of successes have you been seeing since that has been implemented?
I think that was the impetus for success in introducing interiors as a practice in general, right? It was really about a desire to have beautiful spaces that on the inside that sort of matched the level of design work that was happening on the outside, which was sort of award-winning, fantastic architecture, and then wanting to sort of control that experience through to the interior. So I think from really the inception of the interiors practice at MA, that was always sort of the goal. And we're having a lot of success in the recent past with hospitality, but I think if you look from the very beginning of MA Interiors, which I think was 2012, 2013-ish, you'll really see a lot of very strong projects, more strong than you might normally expect to see coming out of an architecture firm. I mean, we could talk about Wythe Hotel a little bit, which was really on the cusp of the interiors practice and was a collaboration with folks at MA and outside of the office. But I think, that's a project that's still really strong today from an interiors perspective. So I think it really is from the inception, this idea of wanting to have world-class interiors to match sort of our world-class architecture, and building it from the ground up and sort of investing in the people to make that happen.
Now, I know when you say the Wythe, is it Wythe or Wythe? See my pronunciation, Wythe. It's one syllable. Wythe. So going in that, and then if you were to, since 2012 or 13, what what do you, just to frame it up for our listeners, what do you think the 3 most impactful projects that y'all have worked on, or that MA has worked on, from an architecture and also incorporating the interiors perspective?
That's
Hospitality specific?
Yeah.
I would say the Wythe for sure, which was the first hotel project we had, and also was extremely impactful in that neighborhood of North Williamsburg. I think the Goodtime Hotel, which I worked on, and we did not do the interiors on, for better or worse. It would have been nice to, but and then the fourth hotel in Atlanta has been was completed this year or last year, and it's been really impactful, and it was that was a great, it's a great collaboration and even kind of juxtaposition between interiors and architecture. They're very distinct designs that you wouldn't think automatically would work well together, but they really do. And I think it also kind of speaks to where we are in terms of those 2 aspects of the practice really having their own voice, and, having the confidence to design independently, sort of, or sort of somewhat independently and somewhat collaboratively. So it's really a great product.
Okay. And I'm glad you brought the 4th up, and I'd like to dig into that one a little bit more, because I've spoken to many people who were architects and became interiors focused. And I've spoken to many people who were interior focused and then said, you know what, I want to do the architecture. And again, going on the premise that where you're bringing both of these skill sets to bear, you said something that there was an interesting juxtaposition at the 4th, where there was like a conflict, but it turned into a really cool presentation of what hospitality is from an architecture and interiors. So imagine, and maybe we can take a photo and drop it into the YouTube version of this, but walk us through what that interesting juxtaposition is, that I could maybe overlay a photo or a couple of photos that would describe it as you're speaking.
Do you want to start with the architecture?
Yeah, I mean, we started in that project. We started with the architecture, as we usually do. In the operator, the operator is a partner in the whole thing that's important, and they drive a lot of logistical but also aesthetic decisions. And so the operator came a little bit later in that conversation, but the architecture was something that the client really wanted to be iconic, and they wanted this kind of jewel box building that could be seen from. It's in the old 4th Ward in Atlanta, and it's right on a large open space, and so you wanted to be able to see this kind of great jewel box building from across the park and have it be this kind of icon really for this development. And so, that's where we came up with that sort of diagrid structure that would be a striking building. And then as we, that was the first sketch we did. And that's one of the few projects where the first sketch literally is built. And so it really didn't change much. There's a few little tweaks here and there, but and so that strong sort of design was established very early on, and it's very modern. It's sort of floor to ceiling glass, and it's pretty sort of spare. And then when the operator got involved, whose method, who we also might talk about more, they started to have a sense of what they wanted the feeling to be like, and it wasn't totally matching with the exterior aesthetic, but I think we were able to pair those really successfully. I don't know if you have more to add.
I mean, I think when you have the sort of strong juxtaposition the way we do there, it feels like it transports you, right? You walk up to this building, it feels clean, it feels sparse, but very impactful. But once you walk through the doors of that project, you're sort of immediately transported somewhere else. And I think that there's something really magical about that kind of experience, particularly in a hotel. You're there to get away, to sort of be in a new place. And I think if you can have that sort of moment of transportation to another world or another way of being as you sort of walk through those doors, the project's going to be a great success. And I think it is very different on the inside, but I think that's part of what makes it so successful.
Yeah, and speaking from my own experience, I was down in Atlanta, I think in the fall for an entrepreneurial conference, and I remember a group of the people were all like, they were trying to figure out what to do before dinner. They're like, "Oh, let's all go and check out the Fourth. It's really amazing from an architectural perspective, and just go in and see what it was all about." And it's a really remarkable building. And how often is the first sketch executed?
Not often, but I mean, I think that it just boiled down to a very simple, a very simple sketch. I mean, you could sketch it in, 2 seconds, and that I think is the power. Oftentimes those are the best projects where it's just a simple idea. It's just, sort of a diagrid exterior that just created a lot of cool moments, around the building, and different ways to experience the building from below. There's a big podium on that project too. So there's a lot of public space where you're very close to the building, and kind of, getting these cool views of it. And so, yeah, I mean, it was sort of a powerful, simple move that everyone was able to latch onto, like Becca was saying, of sort of like this North Star for the project. And this was, I don't know that this was the North Star for everyone, but it was just a simple idea that everyone latched onto, that like no one wanted to let it go. And so when you don't have an idea that's so simple, it's very easy to sort of have it be watered down, because, you're not clear what the idea is. So it's sort of, it can be more easily lost, sort of in the progress of the project, which is inevitably a very arduous and, difficult journey to keep your idea intact.
Okay, so now speaking about that one, let's shift over to Brooklyn and the Wythe Hotel. What's a moment in there that you feel does a really good job of addressing and balancing out that interiors versus architecture? What's like that moment within that project that stands out to you, Becca?
I think some of what makes Wythe so special is that it really was on the cusp of the development of Williamsburg to what it is today. It was very early in sort of the development of that neighborhood. And we have one picture, which I think we can share with you and flash up for the folks watching on YouTube, but it has a picture of one of the hotel rooms and then an adjacent building with a vintage advertisement on it. And I think that conversation between, we're very contextual designers. Morris always says, we stand out, our buildings stand out by fitting in. And I think there couldn't be anything sort of more perfect than seeing this hotel room bed and the adjacent building with this sort of vintage advertisement painted on the facade of the building that's coming in through the window of this hotel room in a really beautiful way. We couldn't be more perfectly contextual than that. And I think that really speaks to this sort of language between the interior and the exterior on that project.
Cool.
I think that it also has a similar sort of aspect to the Fourth, where the portions of the building that are new are very clearly modern and very clearly juxtaposed to the existing building. And so there's that kind of juxtaposition, and that also was another very simple kind of sketch. Morris has the sketch actually where he first sketched it, with the hotel sign going down the bottom, but the new portion of that building being very sort of modern. It's a sort of very, just glass sort of window wall, and so the interiors are. They had to sort of work with both scenarios, where it's like a punched window, a brick punched window, but also a full, floor to ceiling glass window. And so, yeah, kind of similar motif there to the Fourth.
So now I want to go back to the beginning of our conversation, where I was asking, like, what's the best type of project where a client of yours would bring on architects and interiors with intention straight from the beginning. Walk us through like a situation where that happens, which I'm sure it happens more frequently now. But when you say setting it up and getting all aligned around the North Star, from a process perspective, when you're kicking it off and the client is all on board with MA, hook, line, and sinker from the beginning, like how do you kick that off together, and how do you do everything you can to ensure success, like in those other projects that we just spoke about?
I mean, I think we start with research always. That's kind of the basis of our design work, and that might be research on the city, the state, the block, the building itself, if it's an adaptive reuse project, or even the site if there isn't a building there. What that sort of like research exploration is really critical to us, and usually something reveals itself that we're interested in or want to know more about. And I think that is always the start of the project for us. And I think then it's about sort of attaching ourselves to the right piece of that research, or the right pieces of that research that are going to kind of tell the story about the project. And then I think you sort of layer in, we like the client to be kind of involved in that too. Even when people bring us a project, they've often been working on making this project a reality for weeks or months before they engage us from a design capacity. So they also have sort of perspective on what the project means, or little tidbits of history about the site or the building or the location that they want to share with us. And so that feels really critical to us, to sort of get them involved from the very beginning and hearing their perspective. And I think to speak of success, it's really about kind of finding the right big idea and feeling good about that from an interior or from an internal perspective, and then getting the client on board and having them feel good about it. There's a lot of players involved in creating a successful project. So I think if we can be really aligned with the client and they can buy into sort of what our big idea is, I think that's only going to sort of support the success as you add layers, as you add operators, and maybe you have a separate designer for an F&B space. There's, by the end of the project, you've got loads of people involved. So I think the sort of stronger out of the gate idea you have, the better off the project will be, and the more buy-in from the key stakeholders.
So when I hear you say big idea, and I look at your catalog of past work, these are not standard projects by any stretch of the means, right? I mean, they're all I would say architecturally significant and challenging and like remarkable, right? So that doesn't apply to every single client that's out there. Like, to have a big idea and to be able to execute that from just being able to construct it, there's got to be some real vision and investment behind it as well. So for these kind of like marquee projects that you're working on that are kind of architecturally redefining of an area, right? That's not for every developer that's out there. There's a certain level of commitment that they got to buy in with you. So like, what are your challenges in finding those types of projects?
I think we've been and this is obviously a credit to Morris, but he's been very successful in carving out a niche for the firm where we work largely on commercial projects, or projects with developers that are for profit, but they're with clients that really value design. They're with developers that are very knowledgeable and very savvy about the value that design can bring, and very respectful of it. And so when you say it's not for every developer, that's true. I mean, there are some clients that we have that maybe aren't fully aware of, or let's say we would like them to be more appreciative of what we think the value is in what we can offer. But we always bring that to the table. We're not there's not like sort of marquee projects and non-marquee projects. We're bringing the same mentality and sort of rigor to every project, because I think because maybe foolishly, we do think that every project can change the neighborhood that it's in, or the sort of narrative of that street, or the people in the building. So yeah, maybe that's naive.
Well, yeah, and I'd love to dig into that a little bit more, because when did Morris start the firm?
97.
97.
Yeah.
Okay, and then he's, in starting that as a founder, working on some pretty incredible projects, right? Just in general. And then there's a book out there called The Founder's Dilemma, right? And it's, okay, so how do you keep growing and offering new products and services, but also stay true to those founding principles and working on those types of projects that are, like, in this case, like architecturally, I would say, significant, right? So how do you, like, as on the receiving end of that and being part of this growth and team, and Morris is involved, but really he's trusting the next wave of people to keep growing and working on these projects. How does he get involved in the projects, but also trust that, like, hey, you guys are pretty freaking awesome, and, like, go.
I think he's done a really good job at creating a sort of identity to the firm that's very digestible and very, I guess it's at the same time, it's very easy to digest, but also easy to adapt, and also easy to sort of see where you could take it. I think that, and he allows that kind of exploration in the studio, right? So there are buildings that you're like, that's an MA building. I mean, I get texts from clients all the time being like, this must be you. I'm walking down the street in Charleston. It's like, this has got to be an MA building. And it's true. Or there's a lot where it's like, is this you, or did someone rip you off?
Exactly. Were they right? Was that client right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that is a total testament to Morris's, vision about buildings, and it's easy for people to grasp that, and both outside of the firm, but inside the firm too. And I think that that's sort of how I see personally, that being able to be possible, and also for that to be even a big, sort of advantage of the firm, is that we can. It's not, like a Frank Gehry or something like that, where it's like, clearly it's his hand, literally his hand is the one sketching the curves. I think our sort of position on both architecture and interiors is more dynamic, and I would say more interesting, because it really engages, like we were saying, a lot of tradition. It's a lot of tradition that we're really understanding, and then sort of commenting on, or building on.
I think it speaks to Morris's really commitment to collaboration too, particularly in the office. I think we have an incredibly collaborative atmosphere just at pinups. He's very accessible to staff and to project teams, to pull him in. We meet with him weekly or sometimes daily, depending on the project, for advice or sort of clarity. But he's not sort of a top-down, sort of founder, I would say. If he has a great idea, we're certainly going to go with it. But if somebody who's an intermediate designer has an amazing idea, nobody is going to say, oh, but you're junior staff. We don't pursue those ideas. It really is about sort of getting in a room, talking things through. What's the direction here? And the sort of thoughts about a project or ideas about a project can come from anybody in those spaces. And I think their voice is valued in that way. And I think that that's part of the magic that he's sort of created here, is that type of environment.
Hey, everybody. We've been doing this podcast for over 3 years now. And one of the themes that consistently comes up is sustainability. And I'm just really proud to announce that our sponsor, Berman Falk Hospitality Group, is the first within our hospitality industry to switch to sustainable and recyclable packaging, eliminating the use of styrofoam. Please check out their impact page in the show notes for more info. And then, Becca, as far as your experience on the interior side of things, like working for many different pretty awesome interiors firms. And then what's interesting about your arc is that then you went into retail, right? And taking all that kind of more hospitality and residential experience and then into retail, and now you're back into hospitality. What was that detour into retail like for you? And what was something that like super surprised you about that you're bringing on into your career path and journey forward?
I think the biggest change for me in moving from Averco to One Kings Lane is I went from, many years of experience working in design studios where almost everybody on the payroll was a creative, right? You'd have a couple of people who were sort of managing HR, payroll, accounting, but really, the bulk of my career had been in design studios where most of the people employed by that company were creatives. And then I went to One Kings Lane, where it was the exact opposite. Almost everybody who worked there had a business background, a business degree, and then there was a very small percentage. It was a big company at the time, but a very small percentage of the people working there were creative. So that was a real change, a real shift for me. And of course, I became very close with this sort of small group of creative people, and I think we understood each other really quite well and are still friends today. But what the opportunity gave me is to really understand how businesses are run, how businesses make money, how you have reach, how you market things, how you speak about the work that you're doing. That was a huge learning for me, and I think really changed the way I approach my work. I think it helps me understand my clients better. I think it allows me to give advice in my role here at MA in a different way. It just sort of has expanded my perspective and sort of how to exist in the professional world. It's between these sort of two dichotomies.
And looking at your path as well, I see you were at Mark Zeff as well.
I was.
And I want to say I've been to so many design firms all over the country, and the library that he has there, the palette, I don't know if he still has that library set up the way it was, but where it was just like you walk into this place of inspiration and creativity. I've never seen anything like it. It's really, really remarkable. Did that experience, like, how has that influenced you going forward when you're starting to work on a project?
Well, I think a couple of things. First, I've been very lucky, but working for Mark was technically my sort of second job after I moved to New York in the early 2000s. But the first job was a little bit different. We were doing sort of historical renovation. So I would say I really credit Mark with teaching me how to be a designer. I cut my teeth working for him, and he gave me a lot of responsibility, probably a level of responsibility I wasn't really prepared for in my 20s, but he trusted me to sort of get the job done. But I didn't have anything else to compare it to. So I didn't realize, vendors would come in, people would come in and say, "Oh, you have such a beautiful office space. You have an amazing library." But I didn't know anything different. I didn't sort of know that other places didn't invest in materials in that way. And I think it absolutely influenced me as a designer, I think, in a way that still happens here at MA, and certainly was something that happened at Averco, is that you sort of, when you're exploring a project or when you're working on a project, you step away from the computer. You want to be in the library. You want to pull materials. You want to put together sample trays that inform the project, even at the most early sort of contextual level. Is this about raw concrete or is it about polished marble? What is the sort of playing field here? And I think it absolutely influenced the way that I work. And like I said, I've been really lucky to work in offices that really value that. I know we do here at MA. We have a beautiful library and invest a lot of resources in it to make it feel like it has the right ingredients in there. But we also spend a lot of time in there. And I think that's just really critical to getting off the computer and touching and feeling things. And I think, something I think about a lot is how somebody going to feel in the space, right? And if you can look at those materials and have them in front of you, I think that is sort of a bridge to how the space is going to be executed. We spend a lot of time looking at things modeled on the computer, looking at them in 3D and using technology. And I think there's a moment for that sort of analog experience of taking a step back and like, but what does this plaster look like? Is it going to be shiny? Is it going to be rough? How is that going to affect you when you enter a space? I think it's just really critical. I think it's one of my favorite parts of the project. But yeah, I think it probably does stem from that experience in Mark's office.
And then kicking it over to Ian now, like, okay, I love that idea of everything is so digital, from renderings to drawings to just project timelines, virtual meetings, everything. When you're starting a project and through the life of the project, what are those analog moments for you?
Yeah, we actually have seen a kind of resurgence of hand drawing, which I love and I'm trying to promote in the office. I think that it's also refreshing for our clients to see hand drawings. And there's a lot of nuance to a hand drawing that is very hard to convey in a digital rendering, or it takes a lot more effort to get there in a digital drawing than it does analog. And so I think that early on we're doing more and more hand sketching. It's something we're trying to promote, like I said. And so I think that, when we're just, sitting down in a group trying to, think about massings, and, everyone is sketching. Morris is continually sketching. But we're trying to, bring that into, keep that going. So it's not just at the very, beginning of the project, and try and keep that sort of hand quality going, because, separate to interiors, architecture doesn't have the same connection with materials, or it's not as sort of visceral. It's not like, because a lot of times, you're building you're doing a design that maybe you will never touch, or no one will ever touch that or get up close to that material. So it's not so personal. And so I think, keeping that connection with the hand drawing is our version of the analog materials library visit.
Cool. And then bringing it all together, right? So you have this visceral analog kind of interior component. You have the building this core and shell that people may not touch. When you think about it through the lens, bringing all those together under one roof, and you think about it through the lens of placemaking, which, like, you've made these really remarkable places. Like, how do you view those through the lens of placemaking, not playmaking? That's for football, but placemaking.
How do we view our projects through the lens of placemaking? Yeah. I think that's totally critical. I mean, I think that we're looking at placemaking from the macro to the micro. So we're looking at it from the city scale. We're working. I don't know if we mentioned, but we have architecture and interiors as the majority of our practice, but we also have like sort of bookending that. We have planning, and then art services. So it's really a wide range of design disciplines that we're working in, and scales. And so placemaking is like, our main focus in all of those avenues or all of those disciplines. So we're constantly thinking about sort of how our buildings, are inspired by and sort of can fit in, but can also contribute and maybe can push the neighborhood, or can have a conversation with the neighborhood in a way that sort of helps the whole neighborhood. So it's not like it's standing out so much that it's, just sort of like this icon doesn't have anything to do with its neighbors. It's more like we really want our building to sort of be contextual, like stand out by fitting in, right? It's sort of like it's contextual, but it also sort of pushes the neighborhood a little bit in a gentle way.
Okay, so now I want to keep pushing forward to the placemaking as it pertains to hospitality. And now, Becca, you've been there for, I think, just over 4 years. So you moved over there just kind of, what is that, after the pandemic, right?
Just
And you're working on some pretty awesome projects. As you look at this platform at MA that you have with architects, interiors, and everything else that Ian just mentioned, what's exciting you most as you look to the future?
I think something we've been talking about a lot in the office is thinking about branded residences. We've had a couple of successful projects in that sort of typology. And I think one thing that's really interesting is that a lot of folks look at branded residences like a hotel because it is often a brand that is associated with a hotel. But what we're sort of discovering is that this project typology often, now it depends, there are nuances to every sort of project that comes through the door, but often branded residences are more closely matched with a multifamily project, and that you're then layering on sort of this brand experience. But the sort of technical knowledge that you need really is rooted in this sort of multifamily technical knowledge and experience, which is something that, is a big part of our expertise. We've done a lot of those types of projects. You do also need to understand hospitality work and how to sort of bring the brand in, have a hospitality experience. But that's sort of a layer on top of this function that I think, we're very uniquely positioned to sort of help and work with clients who want to work on branded residences because we have these sort of deep roots and levels of experience in both sort of multifamily and in hospitality projects where there's a brand involved and sort of a big name brand that wants to get their messaging across as well.
I'd also say, just for a brand that, okay, two things. One, I don't know why branded residences hasn't taken off more, because to me, when you think about these big multinational luxury, it doesn't even have to be luxury, just brands.
Mm-hmm.
The brand is really what drives the value. And when you think from a hospitality perspective, like, it's a complete 100% immersion. I mean, you're listening and smelling and breathing and hearing. All of your senses are just like confined within whatever this brand is trying to convey. The other thing is, as far as the types of projects and the striking projects that you guys have worked on from an architectural perspective as well, many of those brands would need your kind of, I don't know if revolutionary is the right word, but like striking and very different architectural perspectives to help convey and break through whatever their brand is into the built environment. So one, I don't know why these don't take off more. It's starting, but I don't know why it didn't happen 20 years ago. And number two is, I think you guys are really well situated for that. And like, what kind of conversation, I guess those 2 points are, what kind of conversations are you having out there with the brands of the world who are exploring these residences?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's an attraction to our design ethos among the brands that we're working with, where they liked our approach to, like, our sort of research-based approach, where they're coming into a market and they want to be contextual and good neighbors, but at the same time be distinctive and be true to their brand. They don't want to stand out like a sore thumb, or be sort of be an enclave separate from the city. They want to open their doors to the city and engage, and sort of bolster the whole area. And so I think that approach aesthetically has been attractive to those brands. And so we've seen that and heard that from multiple brands, and that also carries through to the interiors. And so I think, I mean, we're excited for that. And like Becca said, we're we've have a lot of experience in the large scale multifamily space, and I think that's very comforting for those clients, but infusing that sort of like magic that you want in a hospitality space is not something that a lot of firms can do. I mean, it's really like one or the other. And I think that we're trying very hard to do both. And so I think Becca and I specifically are very focused on that. And so we're very, we're very excited when we get an opportunity to kind of show that and to kind of prove that we can do that, because it's not common that can come from one firm.
And I think you're right, Dan. I think there's opportunity for this type of work, not just at the sort of highest level with sort of luxury brands. I think people want experiences that sort of match their price point, right? And it's not necessary, everybody can't afford a Lamborghini, but you can get a really nice Volvo.
Right.
You can drive a great Subaru. I think it's
right. And be proud of it.
Absolutely. And it can meet your needs. So I think seeing this expand to other sort of price points or brands that aren't just sort of at the luxury level is a real opportunity for the industry.
And even the luxury brands are conversely, focused on lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where it's not only about, what is, how much can you be pampered? It's how much can you engage in the city where you're in, or sort of have these aspirational lifestyle goals where the hotel can sort of help you get there, and they're not all about spending money. It's sort of like about health and cultural awareness, and so those things are things that we as designers can really help them sort of infuse into the design from the outset.
And I think that goes right back to what we were talking about at the start when you asked us what hospitality means. It's about caring for people, sort of fostering community and showing people a good time. That the fact that that's part of sort of who we are and what we do, it really changes the game when it comes to those types of projects.
Well, let's just go back to the fourth for a second, right? And okay, architecturally, really impactful building, right? And then I think that Ian, I think it was you, Ian, who said earlier that the clients that you love working with are the ones that really appreciate design and are willing to invest in it, right? For that type of project. How has that, does the fourth exhibit any like outcomes that, okay, investing in that design actually helped this become a financially leading hotel in the area? Is there like an ROI for a client to invest in design like that and construction?
I mean, you mean like numbers wise? I don't know
Yeah.
if I can give you the numbers, but yeah, I mean, we repeatedly
Over and over again
are achieving or exceeding, I should say, our clients' pro formas. So, where the underwriting of the project is usually somewhat conservative, and we've been fortunate to be involved in a lot of projects that are sort of breaking the norm. And so it's a risk, and it's an experiment, by the client. So they think like, okay, I think we can, perform at this level in this new market, or bringing this new typology or this new sort of design idea or product to this market. And we've repeatedly been able to sort of outperform the sort of, I guess, more standard product that are the comparables in that market, and that's 100% attributed to the design. There's not, maybe the building is built for a little bit more money, but it's not so much more to build that it is performing above the competitors.
It's just thinking about what the spaces look like in a way. And I think, that is kind of about layering on when it comes to our multifamily work. It is layering on this thinking about hospitality and sort of how do you welcome someone home in a building that has 150 units? How do you create moments of community for them? And people are willing to pay for that. People are very design savvy. They care about design. This industry would not have had the growth that we've seen in the last 20 years if people weren't getting smarter and more demanding about what things look like. And I think, our ability to sort of respond to that and execute a good design, sort of no matter the price point, shows over and over again in this sort of increase in ADR or, sort of blowing out the expectations of the pro forma. And we're really proud of our track record from that sort of business perspective.
Yeah, it is reassuring because oftentimes I hear, a developer will overspend on their hotel and then it just doesn't perform. But I've just heard through the grapevine that those properties, especially I think it was the Fourth, is like outperforming other hotels in that area. And I don't know, just by virtue of me being at a conference that wasn't even hospitality related, and people were like, "Oh, let's go check that out. It's pretty amazing." Again, that's only anecdotal, not scientific, but I love it when people invest in design, and I love it when markets change and people are continually innovating.
I mean, I think, we're so used to working on very tight budgets that it forces you to be creative and to bring that value through design, right? So it's really a good exercise for a designer to say, like, your budget is nothing or your budget is zero. What can you do? And so, a lot of the multifamily work is like that. And there may be some hospitality developers that are so well funded or so, that they don't care what they spend on the hotel, but that's not how we would approach the project anyway. And we never get those clients, because we don't want a project that doesn't perform well and is, out of touch with the market or what people want. We're very sensitive to those budgets, and also we think they're not a detriment to the project at all.
But I also like looking at the Wythe Hotel in particular as well. You have this adaptive reuse where it's a brick base and then a lot of glass and steel coming out of it. And I can only imagine what the budget is going into that. And then as you start doing demo and building into it and building above it, like what kind of surprises may lurk. In the case of adaptive reuse, how do you mitigate many of those surprises that could come? Because I can only imagine.
There's always going to be some. Yeah, there's always going to be some.
I don't know that there's more in adaptive reuse than new build. I mean, there's so many surprises in sort of executing a project in this environment that we're in and have been sort of since 2020. I think, adaptive reuse is sort of one issue. And I think with those types of projects, it's a little bit more needing to have boots on the ground because you're really sort of uncovering something and needing to come up with a solution sort of on the spot. But I think the same sort of challenges come to you with new build. It's sort of like, oh, guys, hey, this is the cost of this raw material and we can't afford that anymore. So what's our next step? Or Ian can give a better architecturally focused example of this, but it is sort of like, okay, we thought laying these bricks was going to be the right path forward, but it turns out we need to do a different execution. And how can we do that? So I think it is a little bit more challenging. It's a different process with adaptive reuse, but I think just in the environment that we're in, it's really important that we have some level of flexibility and plasticity in sort of our approach to once you get to sort of the execution of the project.
I have another question. So if I were to appear in front of Morris and ask him, like, if he could define which project that he worked on, it doesn't have to be hospitality, but just like which project that he worked on in his career that helped launch his practice and really did it, what do you think he would say?
I mean, the Theory Building was the first building that we did
In meatpacking,
and the client didn't realize that it was our first building. I think he thought that we had done projects before, and didn't matter. It was a great project. So I think that one, and then the Wythe came very. I think the Wythe and then the Samsung Building, 837 Washington, both came right after those. So the Theory Building is a completely ground up building. 837 Washington, the Samsung Building, which is right on the High Line, and the Wythe are both partially adaptive reuse. And so I think those three were very high profile projects that were very impactful for their respective neighborhoods, and also had a kind of cohesive design language and sort of ethos. And so I think that collection of buildings and kind of little portfolio of projects was very impactful for the firm.
I'll try and get a photo of the theory in here as well. But if I do, thank you for framing it that way, because I was doing a very bad job of like fumbling around to try and talk about how these projects are like neighborhood redefining or defining. And when I think back to all of those that you just mentioned, they've changed the trajectory of a neighborhood. Like meatpacking, I think I don't remember when the Theory Building opened, but it was like probably early aughts, like 2000 something.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that was like, that whole area just transformed. Now I'm sure it was a confluence of all these things, and he happened to be there when it was happening. But like, if you really step back with perspective and look at it, like, holy crap. And same with the Wythe. I mean, it's amazing. And it might be too early to tell with the fourth, because I think that just opened less than a year ago, maybe. But again, it's like, those are pretty cool chess pieces to have on the board.
Definitely. I think, each project, I mean, you could say, and then like Goodtime was a project. I think those three projects, and, Scholastic is in there too, but Scholastic was done, it was designed by Aldo Rossi, who was Morris's mentor and who died. And so Morris completed that project. But the three I mentioned were really done, by Morris. And then, I think as we've been growing as a firm and our footprint expanding, Fourth and like Goodtime are projects where they're outside of New York, and it's sort of I think Goodtime is in Miami historic district, the Art Deco district, and so that is a sort of our take on the design, the I guess the Art Deco Miami aesthetic. And then similarly in Atlanta, Fourth has a different approach that we're kind of, like we were saying before, really catering that to the specific place where it is. And I think that's something that people recognized in New York as being very relevant for those specific places. And then, as we do that more and more outside of in different locations, that sort of theme just continues and is hopefully appreciated by the people that see them.
Fantastic. This has been awesome. I really appreciate all of your time. And if people wanted to learn more about MA or connect with you guys, what's the best way for them to do that?
I think they can visit our website at ma.com, and they'll find a lot of information there about our practice and our portfolio. But we're also very active on Instagram and LinkedIn, so you can find us there too. And if you prefer email, you can email us at info@ma.com.
Perfect.
We have the easiest emails ever.
Yeah.
I was just remarking, like that URL is amazing. I shudder to think how much you guys paid for
got
that.
in early. He got in early. He's a man with a vision.
Bought it from Massachusetts.
ma.gov. That's probably the other one. But wow, this has been so fantastic. And thanks. I don't know, it's just like so good to think about how impactful these projects were at that time and continue to be in those places. So I just appreciate your time and experience so much. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. You had a great, you were drawing out gems from us. So
absolutely.
It was fun for us too.
And also, I just want to thank our listeners. If this changed your thinking on hospitality, designing for hospitality, the life of architects or designers, please like, comment, subscribe, pass it along to anyone who you think might benefit from hearing this. I appreciate all of you. We're almost at 200 episodes. So, it's just exciting to keep having these incredible conversations. So thank you to all of our listeners.